Welcome to the podcast, Beyond Expectations, Parenting Autism. Follow Michelle Chabola's journey of raising a child with autism, the challenges, victories, and rewards. If you're a parent, caregiver, or simply someone seeking to understand autism on a personal level, you're in the right place.
All right, here we are with Beyond Expectations, and today we have a very special guest, one of Gregory's favorite teachers from high school, Mr. Brad Markusch. Welcome to Beyond Expectations, Brad.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And I thank you for doing this to get it out to parents and you're doing a great service to anybody who's in special ed. So thank you for doing this.
Awesome.
Awesome. Very amazing.
Okay. All right.
So what do you think, Brad? What do you think parents should be most informed about? I know high school comes way faster than anybody think it does, because when you first get the diagnosis, you're so overwhelmed. And then before you know it, your kid's in high school and then they're handed off to you. So what classes did you teach and what do you think they should be taught?
So, I was, I taught for 25 years, 30 total, but I was drawn to special education because I had an older brother that was learning disabled. And back then, when I was young, they didn't have any services at all for kids with learning disabilities. And what they would generally do is they would hold you back for a year or even 2 years in some cases. So it was when the federal government passed IDEA, which is the Individual with Disabilities in Education Act, in the mid 70s. It kind of changed the whole game for kids with disabilities. And I with my brother's disability, he was picked on and he was ostracized in school, and he had a rough time. And even through, he was only a year ahead of me, but going through high school and, even beyond, he struggled, for years. And even after I went into special education and got my master's degree and everything, he just never really understood his disability. And so for me, it was kind of a passion to go into special ed and try and help kids who normally would not have been helped along the way. So then in high school, I taught high school, my entire career, and what we did as a special ed, and I'm going to refer to my team because there are a lot of great special ed teachers out there, especially where Gregory went to school at Chatfield High School in Colorado. We had a great team and we worked well together. And our kind of motto was we want to work with kids. And people would, say, well, there's a lot of paperwork involved with special ed, but as a team, we really felt we wanted to spend our time with kids and get them ready for beyond high school. And that's all part of IDEA. You get, free, appropriate education in the least restrictive environment, which means whatever Gregory and his disability can handle, that's where we would put kids. So I taught, I taught resource rooms. I taught every different subject. And I pulled kids out, and then we would do what we call push-ins, where we would go into the classroom, into a regular classroom with our group of students, and we would help them in that regular classroom. So the classroom that I had with Gregory was a special ed class. No, it was a regular ed class, and it was just a life skills class. So we did, we tried to teach everything, that that a student would need beyond high school, and get them prepared for the work world, and get them and ready for, not be. I mean, in high school, our caseload, we would kind of let our kids kind of take control of their destiny. And if they were interested in a career in, whatever, uh, construction or whatever, we would tend to, get them prepared for that. And I even had one kid that wanted to go into the NBA, and
I love
and,
it.
and I mean, he had no basketball skills, but he just wanted to play basketball in the NBA. So in situations like that, I'd have to, okay, well, what's your plan B, and so, but I'll never forget that young man. Great, he was a great kid. Um, so, so that's pretty much what we did. And again, our team was great. We worked well together. We worked well with the regular teachers in the high school, and we just had a great camaraderie. And we would sit in our team meetings and just discuss things about kids. And in Gregory's situation, we would say, what's the best fit for Gregory? And I remember, because I had the greatest time with Gregory in that class. I to this day, I think that was my favorite class of all times. And I don't know if you want me to go into some of the details, but it was just, uh, I mean, I'll tell you a few stories, but one of the best stories I had was the first day, because they put a lot of, you know, kids that needed a lot of help into that class, along with kids that didn't need so much help. But um, I remember the first day I walked into that classroom, and kids were all over the place. They were on the walls. Gregory was doing handstands, and 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 it was like January. He was in shorts. I do remember that, and so I immediately looked around and I said, "This is going to be great. I love this." And so all I had to do was say, "Okay, everybody in your seats," and boom, everybody got in their seats. I mean, for other classes that I've taught, that rarely happened on the first day, but for this day, for this group, it was great. And then I remember one student would come in. Every time I'd come into the classroom, he'd go, "Hello, Mr. Markusch." And so Gregory started doing that. And then it became like every day I'd walk in, and sometimes I'd be late by like 30 seconds just to see what they would do. And I'd walk in, "Hello, Mr." And it was just funny. Gregory, do you remember that?
Yes.
That was
I remember.
awful. You remember that. And then Gregory he had a series of little tricks he would do. And one was I mean, he was always smiling. Of course, he would smile at everything and just have a big grin on his face like he does right now. And he would get really excited. And then um, he would do the hat trick. I don't know if you guys know that it's seen Gregory do the hat trick, but I don't know where those stories. Do you remember this trick, Gregory? Where you do this?
Yes.
You call her,
Now I remember. I remember that trick. Yeah.
hat would go up like that. Gregory, he would just do, and then remember the thumb trick where I'd separate my
Yeah.
thumb. Yeah, I don't know how to do
Oh,
it.
yes.
There we go. And then something like that. So I think the kids kind of identified with that, and I knew that they would trust me in the things that we would do in class. So we did a lot of life skills in that class. Um, and I do remember, um, just off the top of my head, because a lot of these kids were very active, and they would really have a lot of energy during that class. So I would do things like I created this thing called the land canoe races. You remember that, Gregory? Come in and everybody would be like, let's do the land canoe races. So we'd get in our chairs and sitting backwards, and we'd pretend like we were rowing back, and the chairs, the chair
I wish I would have had a teacher like you.
and it always came down to, all right, Gregory and I, this is for the championship. We're gonna see who can who could scoot across the classroom the best. And I remember we had carpeting in the class, so it was kind of hard to do this. So we had taken it out into the hallway, which was the smooth hallway, no problems. And I remember we're getting ready to start, and somebody was counting down, and in walks one of the assistant principals, and he had the biggest, like, what is going on here? Look at me. And Gregory and I are going nonstop down. Anyway, it was we all had a laugh with that. He thought that was the funniest thing. But just stuff like that we get these kids to come in, express how you're feeling, and get them to open up about things that they wanted to do. And we would have we'd talk about jobs. We talk about what kind of job are you interested in? We take little tests and quizzes about, what is it that you like to do, like personality tests. And, it was very, very good class. And I think a lot of the kids just really enjoyed it. So I don't know what you remember from that class, Gregory, but I have fond memories of that, and the rest of your students. So, but another thing,
it's amazing how important fun was to the process. What was kind of the spectrum of capabilities of the class? Were all kind of similar, or was it a big broad array?
it was a pretty wide range. So we had, and of course, that's part of the IDEA, is that you'd have to design your lessons to help every kid. Now, it was a small class. I think I remember maybe 7 or 8 kids in there.
That was nice.
And so it was easier. And I did have a para in there too, so she was very helpful. And so we would design, and she would work with a few kids, and so we kind of, but we had, most of the kids had some sort of disability along that spectrum. Gregory was very high functioning, and he was very detail oriented. And of course, now we know that he's put that to great use, with his artwork. And, but I had kids that, were very, were pretty low on the disability scale. And so we really had to work a lot with those kids. So, but, the whole thing was just a great class.
If you were kind of giving advice to parents as to, now I'm not sure the right way to think about it, but are there a set of skills that you would say, man, if a child's brought to me and they got these things covered, this will be super, super helpful and help accelerate? Is there like a short list that comes to mind of kind of those must-haves?
Yeah, that's the thing you discuss in your IEP meetings: strengths and your weaknesses. So whatever the weaknesses were, we would tailor their IEP to exactly what they needed. It could be anything from learn your multiplication tables up to I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Let's say you were interested in a career in you know construction. Let's just say that. Okay, so we would go through here's the tools that you need. Here's the skills that you would need to become a carpenter. And and that was kind of how we worked out the IEP. The IEP is a legal document, and it pretty much tells the family, the student, us on the team, what we had to accomplish for that given year. And there was a list of skills that we needed to make sure that kids had in their development of their skill levels. So it was a lot, Now, most of my kids were what we called mainstream, and they were in the regular classroom. And then I would either go into that classroom and help them, or I would have like a resource room where they could come down anytime during a study hall, during lunch, during before and after school, where they could get additional help. And those kids that needed that additional help would have a specific class period for that resource room. And that's where we went over their IEPs. We went through their skills and what they needed to learn and be a part of, and be skill level, how we would help them achieve those goals on their IEP. So every student had probably 2 or 3 or even 4 goals that we would try and accomplish throughout the year.
What's an example of those goals? How would a parent think about?
Yeah, so some were pretty basic. So like Gregory will learn the I'm trying to think. I wrote so many of these. But they'd be very specific. So Gregory would learn how to write a 3-paragraph essay, given the introduction, the plot, and the conclusion. And so, that kind of thing would be on a high school kid's IEP if they needed help in, correctly creating a written paper of some sort. So,
Gregory said you taught him to do something. What did you say that they taught you in that class about
resumes?
Oh, taught him
resumes. Yes, yeah, of course. Yes, thank you for reminding me.
Interviews.
Job interviews.
So we did a lot of that. So I mean, I really emphasize in the life skills class, have a good resume. And so we would pretty much write based on, what skills they had, what jobs they've had, maybe, what were some great things they did in high school. I know, Gregory, you were on the unified basketball team, if I remember right. Yep.
Yes, I would.
Yes, you were. And so we, those are the kinds of skills we put on the resume. And even if the resume was just really short, we would try and find things that they did in high school. They were a member of the photography club, or they were out for basketball. Or so we'd emphasize those kinds of things on the resume. And then they had to do a 30-second pitch. Do you remember doing that, Gregory? The 30-second pitch. So
yes,
it was just a short little, 5 to 10 second, introduction. You're introducing yourself to a former or to a future employer, and everybody had to do that in front of the class to kind of get the jitters out. So we had everybody do that, and then the job interview, that was really fun. So we would go one-on-one. You're in an interview, Gregory. So what, I'm going to ask you questions and you reply. And I would have them, I'd have a list of questions, and then they'd have to write out what they would say for those questions. And then we practiced, did mock interviews and that kind of stuff. So thank you for reminding me of that, Greg.
You're welcome.
That was a big part of what we were doing. So just stuff like that. But that's, to answer your question, on the IEP, we were pretty specific as to what exactly we were trying to accomplish and what trying to teach to each student. Each student has their own IEP. So, my parent.
How hard is it? How hard is it for a parent to navigate the public school resources? And what are the keywords that they need to know when they sort of walk in the door?
I would, let's say, like if you're coming into a high school meeting, first of all, we would already know which students are on an IEP before they get to high school. And we would, this is probably something, maybe Michelle, you knew this, but we'd have a draft before the school starts, and we would have every student listed, and we would take turns saying, yeah, I'll take this kid, or I'll take this, or you'd be a good fit for this kid. And so before high school even started for these kids as freshmen, we would know pretty much everything there is to know per the previous year's IEP. Now, if you're doing that, if you come into high school and you're not sure and you're not on an IEP, then you can request. All you have to do is request it with the with one of the AEPs.
This is an individual education plan. Was that what I
Yes, that's the IEP, the individual education plan, and you could request that like the first month, and we would have a meeting. We'd bring in we'd do the tests. We'd have to get testing done and do complete evaluation on the student. And then we would, as a team, we'd have, you've got your social worker, you've got your speech language person, you've got the nurse, you've got other teachers, previous teachers they had, and you would determine whether or not that student would qualify for an IEP. And if there's also a thing called the 504 plan, which is a plan that doesn't include an IEP and a case manager. It more or less, it's kind of a abbreviated version of the IEP, and it's for kids who are not necessarily qualified for the IEP, but they would for a 504. And they would usually, special ed teachers wouldn't guide them through high school. Would be usually the special ed director. They would monitor that progress separately then from what we did. But we would have at our disposal all the information needed to decide whether or not they qualify for an IEP. Now, if you're in middle school or elementary school, you can request that at any time to do an evaluation. And if you're even your elementary school teachers, if they see that there's a possible disability, they can also request it, or any teacher or even a special ed teacher can request that. But then you go through the permission process and the testing and all that. But you can do that as a parent anytime from I think it's age 3 through 21. you can request that. That's all part of their IEP, of the IDEA qualifications.
That's pretty cool. And yeah, that's amazing that's there. I wonder if everyone on this phone, this is all part of this podcast, is getting people a lot of information out there, those resources, doing it for them. Very fascinating.
Yeah, so it's all parent and student friendly. Like I was saying earlier, my brother, they just, held him back and pushed him through. And then, I mean, it was a great thing back in the 70s when they passed IDEA. And then in the 90s, I think it was No Child Left Behind. So there's been some great legislation over the years to help identify and or move kids through schools as quick as possible and appropriate education.
Fantastic. So are there any sort of cautionary signs for parents, things that happen with you saw happen too much that you would have liked the parents to know about leading not to do?
Yeah, I think the one big thing is if you suspect your child has a disability, don't let up. Just keep pushing and request an evaluation through their school and make sure, I mean, there's a lot of testing that is done to determine with the evaluation. So make sure that you get the appropriate, talk to the right people. You can go all the way up to the superintendent of schools if you have to, but if you clearly think there's a disability, and I would say now special ed teachers are well trained. The education, I mean, I got my master's degree and they tell you everything. And I would say 99% of special ed teachers are like, yes, pick me. I think we should do an evaluation. So it is very student friendly. But I've also heard the horror stories that, why was my child denied? But all I can say there is just keep pushing. Keep talking to administrators and teachers, and if you suspect your child has a disability, just keep.
And you mentioned that I think there must be some fear that if you have a child who gets diagnosed with a disability, that they might end up with less service or less experience, and not something they're actually experiencing in school. But we'll talk like in your case, the kids were put into the big with classrooms on a regular basis. Is that something that parents it must be one of the fears of giving a diagnosis. So how do you deal with that? And is that something with parents request, or is that part of what the school determines?
Yeah. So part of IDEA is what we call the least restrictive environment. So that means basically that whatever the least restrictive setting for the student, that's what we utilize. So if a student has skills of math and reading, then we're probably going to put those kids in a regular classroom with support from the special ed teacher. And that's what we do. What's the least restrictive environment that we could put this kid in to still have him become successful? And that's what we would evaluate for. So I know it's I just think back to when my brother was in school. There was no services, no support.
Yeah. Well, Michelle and I remember that at the elementary school we went to, that there was a young man who was probably 5 or 6 years older than his classmates because he was just there. He was like permanently in the 4th grade.
Yeah. And that I mean, that's a sad situation, but I think today, like my last 5 years of teaching, I taught at a school for at-risk kids. 80% of the kids that were on IEPs, And it wasn't the big environment of a high school, but it was an environment where, small classrooms and kids that are the same as everybody else. And a lot of it was social emotional issues, but they felt comfortable there because they weren't under the restrictions of a big high school. Buddy.
I hope he didn't jump.
Yeah,
My Wi-Fi ended up playing,
yeah. Where'd that Starlink go?
Oh.
Yeah, I think the main thing too is like you said, which I never gave up, and it's so easy to give up because you get so frustrated.
Oh my
You
God.
can't give up. And then the children that you were talking about that literally can come into middle school without a diagnosis, that blows my mind, but it happens all the time.
Yeah, it does.
And if you know it's there, push until you can get them evaluated. Just figure out what it is.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, by high school, you should have been diagnosed. So in high school,
Yeah, correct.
we did not do a lot of evaluations, I think, for the years. Welcome back.
We thought you jumped.
No, well, the other day I had Washington, D.C. I'm just so glad because some federal legislation works. I still can't believe it's decent working.
Exactly.
Trying to prevent legislation that won't work.
Look how long it took, Sean. We're talking, I know 70 sounds like a long time ago, but it wasn't. It really wasn't.
Well, and it was. But it's nice to know that at the federal level, there are these regulations or laws, and then those come down to the state level and the city level, and there's resources there. I just hope that the resources aren't so hard to find or aren't so hard to activate for people. They're only making them aware that they are due to services, and the taxpayers pay for those services. We go bring our billing signs up, but it's kind of like you might need to know the secret handshake, right?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
federal law.
Yeah. What's the long name to the federal law?
It's called the Individual with Disability in Education Act, IDEA. That's what all special ed teachers refer it to. But again, talk to an AP, talk to an assistant principal, talk to your child's teacher and tell them you want an evaluation. By law, they have to get the ball rolling on that. So definitely. And it's such I tell people that I'm a special ed teacher. And people would look at me and they'd be like, how do you do that? I can't believe, I feel so bad this is the toughest job. And I'd be thinking in my head, I'd be like, this is the greatest job in the world. I loved it.
You're so good at it.
That's fine. You just think that, but I love this stuff. And it's just so rewarding to see, kids develop. And of course, as a freshman coming into high school, you see they're very eager and they want to fit in and they want to progress. And by the time they're seniors, they're young adults, and it's just so rewarding to see that progress over 4 years. So I just loved it. It was a great.
It's got to be so neat to see them afterwards too, to see where they've gone. Like Gregory, just see like, oh my gosh, who'd have thought, right?
I have to show off some of the things that Gregory made. Yeah. I
think you have the end of the trail too, don't you?
Yep. This is on our fireplace. Look at the detail.
You got a beautiful end of the trail. Yeah.
Gregory, you are just fantastic.
Thank you.
And of course, this is my favorite. I can't go without showing this.
Oh,
the Green
Bay Packers.
Yeah, you've done some great.
Gregory, Packer fan.
Yeah.
Gregory came off with a hat on and a shirt on, and Jesse's like, "What happened here?"
Love it. I love it. You keep that up, Gregory.
Went from a Houston Texan to a Green Packer fan one day.
Yeah, I always watch Shark Tank
Oh, you would always watch Shark Tank. Yeah.
during class.
That's right. That's right. I was, because all those great ideas. Maybe Maybe you thought about that when you were
He watches it
Yeah.
all the time.
awesome. Yeah.
I do.
It's
I do.
What's the
Well,
you're posting in business?
you are certainly one of the best, greatest entrepreneurs I know. So
Thank
thank
you.
you for you awesome. You're awesome. So
Well,
Thank
Brad, thank you.
you.
Thank you for what you did, man. You had a great career and made a great impact on a lot of people. The world's a better place because of people like you.
Awesome.
I appreciate that.
Awesome. Thank you, Brad. And we will see you soon, hopefully in April.
Yes, these.
All right. Sounds good. Bye, Gregory. Have a
Right.
great,
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Gregory.